Hello, and thank you for having us here. I'm Mara Faye Lethem, and I'm here with Max Besora. We're gonna do a small reading from the Adventures and Misadventures of the extraordinary and admirable Joan Orpi, Conquistador and founder of New Catalonia, which came out in January, I believe, of this year with Open Letter Books. So we want to also shout out to them, all the folks at Open Letter who made this possible. And as you'll see, it was quite an adventure in translation. And so we'll talk a little bit about that after the reading. So we're gonna start with book one, which is not actually the very beginning of the book, but it seemed like a good place to start. And Max will read some in Catalan, and then I'll read the English, and we'll go back and forth for a few pages, and then we'll have a little conversation. Okay.
Llibre primer, on es narra amb gran esperit d'estil i d'una manera que tal com es conta quedarà, la infància i joventut d'Orpí, primer al poble de Piera i après durant els seus anys d'estudi a la ciutat de Barcelona, on visqué diverses experiències, tant de bones com de dolentes, que li ensenyaren que la vida no és un camí de roses, sinó més aviat un llarg viacrucis on s'aprèn a base d'hòsties, i és de llei que la seva història sigui explicada, potser no ben bé igual en què succeí en realitat, però sí almenys d'una manera força versemblant.
Book 1, in which is narrated with great gusto and an eye on posterity, Orpí's infancy and childhood, first in the town of Piera and anon during his studies in the city of Barcelona, where he had varied experiences, as many good as bad, which taught him that life is no bed of roses, but rather a long ordeal where one learns from hard knocks, and as such, and befitting his story, shall be explained, perhaps not exactly as it truly happened, but at least quite similarly.
Capítol 1. Així comença la general història de Joan Orpí d'una manera que per força havia de ser una mena de premonició de la seva posterior vida aventurera. Diuen alguns que el naixement de Joan Orpí fou una mica raro per espectacularíssim. I si no em creieu, escolteu això. Tot començà a la petita població catalana de Piera una vesprada de l'any de la nativitat del nostre Senyor Jesucrist. Quan un colom vell i xacrós, mullat per la pluja que estava caient, baixà volant d'allà enllà d'uns núvols plens d'activitat elèctrica i després de planar per entre els arbres, camps de conreu i de donar 3 imprecises voltes al campanar de l'església, surà pels cels de les xemeneies fumejants de les casetes del poble en un vol prodigiós i últim, fins que les seves ales ja no el pogueren dur més lluny i, finalment, entre gluc-glucs afònics, aterrà maldestrament al cairell angulós d'una finestra on, agonitzant de bestial dolor, consumí els seus últims instants de vida en absolut silenci sepulcral. Aquella finestra donava part de la casa dels Orpí, família de respectable cabdal i notable pedigrí local, i dins l'habitació de la casa, la llum de 3 espelmes deixava veure unes cames aixarrancades, mai depilades i plenes de verius, que tremolaven per l'esforç de portar una nova ànima sobre la terra. La senyora Orpí estava a punt de donar a llum a un infant d'una manera tal que s'entatxonaria la memòria de les gens d'aquells verals i donaria per unes quantes sessions de rumorologia al poble de Piera, almenys durant una tarda de diumenge.
Chapter 1. Thus begins the story of Joan Orpi, indubitably some sort of premonition of his later life of adventures. It is said that while Joan Orpi's birth was a bit strange, it was highly spectacular, regardless. And if you don't believe me, listen to this. It all began in the small Catalan town of Piera. One evening of the year of our Lord Jesus Christ, MDXCIII, if I've got my Roman numerals right, when an old ailing pigeon, wet from the falling rain, flying hither and thither from clouds filled with electrical activity, soared through the trees and sown fields, made 3 shaky circles around the church bell tower, and floated through the heavens of smoking chimneys in a prodigious final flight, until its wings could take it no further, and finally, amid hoarse glooks, it landed clumsily on the angular sill of a window, where, agonizing in horrific pain, it consumed its last moments of life in absolute, sepulchral silence. That window belonged to the home of the Orpís, a family of respectable wealth and notable local pedigree, and inside the room, the light given off by 3 candles revealed spread eagle legs covered in varicose veins and hair, trembling from the effort of bringing a new soul into the world. Mrs. Orpí was about to birth an infant in such a way that would become legend and fodder for numerous sessions of rumor-mongering in the town of Piera, at least for the duration of Sunday afternoon.
Empeny, per l'amor de Déu, Eulàlia, empeny, cridava el vell Orpí. És lo diable qui mena aquesta criatura, querido meu, bravava ella, per a qui aquell naixement estava sent un martiri tan gran que no podia sinó presagiar quelcom funest. La dona, que havia deixat el llit inundat d'excrements, sangs i altres fluids, forçava els seus baixos per tal que la criatura sortís d'una vegada del seu ventre. Tan fort bramava aquesta que semblava que el cel s'escardaria fins a trencar-se en 1000 bocins. Alertats per tota aquella cridòria, a l'exterior de la casa s'havien reunit una munió de veïns encuriosits que assenyalaven amb el dit en direcció a la finestra de la casa dels Orpí. «Se'm rebentarà el pompis i tot!» xisclava ella amb els ulls en blanc. «Ai, m'acatxis, que em moro!» «Bo, no cridis tant, dona, que amb tanta serenata de crits i ruïdo, tot Piera acabarà aquí!» «Xxt, no em vinguis amb cuentos, papet!» ordenà la dona, «que aquest parto és un verdugo que m'ha de matar!» «No t'hi enquimeris, dona, ja veuràs com la criatura sortirà d'un moment a l'altre, fet genio i figúria, i amb bigoti i tot.» «I qui te diu a tu, bobo, que ha de ser un xicot?» preguntà la dona, empenyent. «Muller, bé necessitem un hereu que meni les terres, no? Tu només penses en los dineros, sanguijuela, i jo aquí morint-me de dolor. Doncs jo vull una nena i se diria Maria aquí i a la Conchinchina.» «Això mai, primer un hereu matxo, només faltaria», ordenà el marit. «I se dirà Joan, com mon pare, al cel sia, tant si t'agrada com si no. Si jo et respecto el dolor, almenys respecta'm tu l'herència. Si ens posem en aquest plan, doncs hauries d'avisar totes aquestes fulanes que tens, pus, que per respeto només t'adeus a la teva muller.» «No comencis amb la cançoneta de sempre, Eulàlia», bramà el marit, fingint indignació. «Per lo de més, acabem amb aquest assumpte del parto o m'agafarà un cobriment.» «Sí, claro. Quan te surto amb el tema de les barjaules que visites quan te vas a Barcelona, treus l'escombra i flis-flas, surts amb un ciri trencat. Marrano!» «Eulàlia, sisplau, t'ho prego», diga el marit, agenollant-se al costat del llit. «Prou de xerrameca i empeny, per l'amor de Déu!»
"Push, for the love of God, Eulàlia, push!" shouted old Orpi. "This child be driven by the devil, my beloved," she bellowed, the birth being such great torment that she couldn't help dire prognosticating. The woman had flooded the bed with excrement, blood, and other fluids, and was straining her nether regions to get the baby out of her womb once and for all. So loud did she bellow that it seemed the sky would crack and splinter into 1,000 shards. Alerted by the hollering, a throng of curious neighbors had gathered outside the house and were pointing their fingers at the window of the Orpí's home. "Even me bottom is set to splode," she shrieked, her eyes rolling back in her head. "Aye, God's loaves and fishes, I'm dying hither. Come now, woman, don't scream so. Thy serenade of hurtling and shouting shall bringeth all Piera here." "Shh, quit thy rubbish talk, Pepette," ordered the woman. "This birth art an executioner come to take me." "Peace, be quiet, woman, prithee. Any moment now he'll be out in the world, a perfect right genius, with a mustache and all. And who would have thou believe my baby art a boy child, big lump?" asked the woman, pushing. "Come now, woman, can't ye see we needs an heir to tend these lands? Always with your mind on coin, vile leech. Whilst here I be dying of excruciating pain. My wish is a girl, and she shall be called Maria, hither, thither, and yon. Over my dead bodikins, firstmost a male heir. It's the least thou canst do," countered her husband. and we shall name him Joan, as my father, who art in heaven, whether thou liketh it or not. I'll respect thine pain, at least respect mine legacy. If that be true, then thou oughtn't warn all those whores of yours, since out of respect thou should liest only with thine wife. Daren't ye commence that old song and dance, Eulalia, bellowed her husband, feigning indignation. Let us get this birth over with, or I'm like to faint. Oh, yea, sure, when I raise the subject of the bawds ye frequent in Barcelona, out comes the broom, and fleesh flash, thou changest up the subject right quick. Ye swine. Eulalia, cry thee mercy, said her husband, kneeling by the bed. Quit gabbering and push, for the love of all that be holy.
Amb aquestes arribà a misses dites la matrona del poble, qui, amb les presses, havia vingut només amb el camisó de dormir posat i les sabatilles d'estar per casa. A veure si s'arranca bé les tranques, mi senyora, ordenava aquesta amb un esgarip macarrònic mentre el marit se santificava. Però tot i els esforços d'aquesta experta en parts naturals i antinaturals, no semblava que aquella nit l'infant hagués de néixer, igual que el temporal no semblava tenir gens de ganes de minvar. Ans al contrari, el cel escopia amb més força que mai la seva fúria. Els núvols entrexocaven amb violència i creaven uns raigs elèctrics brutals que queien sobre la terra esberlant muntanyes, cremant boscos i partint arbres de dos en dos. De tal magnitud era aquella tempesta que un d'aquells llamps anà a caure just a sobre la casa dels Orpí, s'entaforà per la xemeneia, baixar com un cuc còsmic i volímic i sortir veloç per la llar de foc del saló, on hi havia un gos que, colpit al morro per la descàrrega elèctrica, mossegà per pur instint caní un dels criats que estava estirat en un jaç. El noi va fer un bot del dolor i xocar contra una lleixa que hi havia sobre seu, i de la lleixa en caigué una olla que contenia 2.000 reals catalans, 10 maravadís d'or, 30 bilions castellans, 40 morabatins de la barba roja, 8 rals d'ardits, 500 diners, 5 croats, 200 lliures, 11 onzens, 30 trentins i una pila més de diner fals que corria per tot el país en aquella època, una moneda de les quals sortí volant i, traçant una semicircunferència perfecta, anà a parar a la boca de la senyora que estava parint. Detall curiós, en tot aquell procés i concatenació de fets seguits l'un darrere l'altre, els electrons del llampec havien anat traspassant d'objecte en objecte per fregament, i la moneda que la dona s'havia passat descarregar electricitat per tot el seu cos, fet aquest que l'ajudà en l'última empenta necessària per tal que, pronunciant un «oh» espantadís, expulsés el nounat de la cova maternal mentre la moneda li sortia pel forat de darrere de manera ultranatural. Plof! Havia nascut Joan Orpí del Pou.
Just then, at the 11th hour, the town midwife rushed in. She was in such a rush that she came wearing just her nightgown and slippers. Let us see if we can't get this here show upon the road, me lady, she barked with a macaronic howl as Eulalia's husband crossed himself. But despite the best efforts of that expert in births, both natural and unnatural, it didn't seem the child would be born that night, nor that the storm had any desire to wane. Quite the contrary, the sky spat out its fury harder than ever, with clouds colliding violently and creating brutal electric jolts that fell upon the earth, cleaving mountains, burning forests, and splitting trees in two. So great was the storm that one of those streaks of lightning fell right atop the Orpi home, hid in the chimney, snaked down like a bulimic cosmic worm, and burst through the fireplace into the living room, where it hit a dog in the snout. The electrical charge set its pure canine instinct into motion, and it bit one of the servants who was stretched out on a straw bed. The young man leapt up from the pane and banged into a shelf above him, and from the shelf fell a pot containing 2,000 Catalan reals, 10 gold maravedis, 30 billion castellanos, 40 of Barbarossa's pfennigs, 8 liards, 500 deniers, 5 croats, 200 pounds, 11 1/3 trentines, and a bunch of counterfeit money, plentiful as it was throughout the country in that period, of which one coin went flying and, tracing a perfect semicircle, landed in the mouth of the woman giving birth. A curious detail Throughout this entire chain of circumstances, the lightning's electrons had transferred from one object to the next when they touched, and the coin the woman swallowed sent an electric charge through her entire body, helping her with the final push needed for her to expel, with a shy, "Oh," the newborn from his maternal cave, whilst the coin emerged from her nether slot in a wholly ultra-natural way. Plof. Thus was born Joan Orpi del Po. So that was an entrance into the world of our protagonist, Joan Orpi, who is actually very loosely based on a real historical character. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Max?
Right, yeah. So Joan Orpi was a real character who lived in the 17th century, and he was from Catalonia. And he was a lawyer, and then, but he was I guess not a very good lawyer. And then he went to Seville, and then he started working for the Spanish army and went to the New World. And then after the years, he conquered some part in the jungle in Venezuela, and he named it the New Catalonia and the New Barcelona. But this city didn't prosper, and so Orpi was forgotten by history. Nevertheless, the Barcelona in Venezuela still exists. It's not in the same place that it was founded by Orpi, but still has the same name. And it was a history that I heard from other people, and I started an investigation, and there was a book about him, but it was like a more like a historical book, but there was no many information about Orpi. So I thought, that's a very interesting story. I could make a novel about it. And so I did. But I had to study a lot about the history of 17th century and how the people speak in that time, Catalan and Spanish. And then I decided to make a mix with the language from nowadays, Catalan and Spanish, and the Catalan and Spanish from the 17th century. And so trying to do like a, postmodern novel, recreating that time, but also like ironically recreating that time to speak about the present. No? And so, yeah, that was it. And but the novel is mostly the language. Of course, there is the story and there is humor, a lot of humor in this book, but it's all sustained by language. So when it came across to translate this novel by Open Letter Books, the publishing house in the United States, and Mara Lethem was the translator, we had a bit of a problem here. How we take this, because there's a lot of slang, modern slang, 17th century slang, neologisms, no? I create also invented words, and so that was so Mara and I, we had a lot of meetings and cigarettes and beer and coffee and yeah, to try to find out how we're gonna do this, because I mean, that was different options on the table on how we're gonna take this translation, right? And so
well, I worked with a lot of different authors, but I think Max is the one who the answer was most often, I don't know, do whatever you want, make it up. So it was a different kind of challenge, because there was, I mean, as you can see from the reading, it's a translation of what he wrote, but there were a lot of moments where I had to just go my own way to also, in the introduction by the storyteller of the story, he explains that the the descriptions are modernized, but he left the dialogue. And of course, there's a lot of anachronisms, which is helpful too. I didn't feel I had to create an accurate, I mean, in fact, I would be doing a disservice if I had created an accurate period voice. But yeah, well, some of it was that I had to understand his intentions before I could defile them.
No, because yeah, my intention at the time to write this novel in the original language was to make a mixed language novel, right? A hybrid, can you say that? Hybrid language. And so there's even Spanglish in the novel, right? So there's all kind of slangs from Venezuela. Like, for example, I also recreate the slang that probably nowadays they speak in Venezuela, you know, and I put it in a 17th century novel. And all these, yeah, it creates like a soup of mixed language. And so when you, Mara, were like sending me emails like, what is this word, what it means, you know, a lot of times I didn't even know, I didn't even remember where I took this word, you know, and it was like, I don't know. I mean, you just invent one, you know. And so I think Mara creates like a really new novel. You know, you're not only the translator of the novel, but also part of an author in the English version, you know. And I think you should be in the cover also because, you know, this is your book, you know, that's my book in Catalan.
Nah.
But this is
well, I would never have come up with a book like
well, yeah.
No offense, but I mean, it takes the mind of Max Besora, but yeah, it was definitely the most that I've been pushed out of my comfort zone of, you know, it's
that's good, you know. I mean, because it forced you, like it forced me to write this. I also had to force my brain to, you know, fusion all this language, and you know, so you had ultimately the same process, you know. And that's why the readers also, I want to have this impression when you read the book that force you like, wait a minute, this is a modern word, but this is an ancient word, and then they are all together, and that's, you know, that's not possible. But also it's fun because when you, it's the same way when you write a very elitist and you know, intellectual word, and then you put a bad word next to it, and then it creates this shock, you know, like this, and that's, I think that's funny, you know. So I think we made the same with this book, right? And also another important thing was the sense of humor, because, you know, I write humor books, and humor is also very difficult to translate in another language because every culture has its own humor. And if I make a joke in my language, maybe in English, you know, it's not funny, you know. But yeah. but you make it with the translation, you know. You read the translation and wow, it's also fun, you know. And even if it's not in the same words, which, you know, that is also a plus, you know, I think.
Yeah, there was one blurb that we translated that from when the book was originally published here, and someone said, every language deserves at the very least 2 great satirical novels, and this one is so Catalan it hurts. And I love that because there's, you know, a lot of the humor is very scatological, which Catalonia is famous for that. If people don't know about our Christmas customs, you can look it up on Google. And these sort of obsessions. I mean, there's one scene that's like, you know, kind of a witch's orgy with all sorts of fluids. That also very culturally specific. So yeah, there's a lot of fun challenges here for sure.
No, and when you do humor, it seems that you know, humor, it's in a very low esteem. People, I mean, the humor novels are often, you know, marginalized because it seems that tragedy, it's more, you know, superior than humor. But for me, humor is more important because it puts everyone in the same level, right? And I think this book has a lot of this, you know, and it's not a white humor, it's black humor, you know, it's a strong humor, and I think, you know, the translation, you know, it's a very accurate version of the original. And so I think the readers, if they like, you know, the good sense of humor, they're gonna like this book, I guess. If you don't like humor, then don't open the book.
Yes, if you're easily offended, this might not be the book for you.
But yeah, I think it was a very pleasant time when we translated this book. We had a very great time, and yeah, I think the reader will feel that, you know, will feel that there's a lot of love in these pages, you know, and yeah, they're gonna have fun. So yeah.
So have a look, check it out, buy it where all the finest literature is available, from Open Letter Books, Joan Orpi.
Yeah.
And we want to say thank you to everyone involved in the San Jordi in New York festival for giving us a chance to read a little bit more from this book and have a little chat.
Thank you very much.
And happy San Jordi, everyone.
Happy San Jordi. Bye.
Bye.